Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for your patience there. Niko and I were just held hostage in the green room, but we escaped, I'm glad to say. So I'm glad to see all of you in here. The chat is on fire already. Super excited for today. My name is Henry Winslow. I'm the founder of Tricycle Day, and I'm joined here by my co-host, Niko Skievaski from Althea. Hey, Niko, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm so excited for this. I feel like we're going to cover the topics that we hear from people all the time, kind of all the questions that come up, and we're just going to hit them all over the next hour and a half.
All of them,
Every
100% of
single
them.
one.
As a
And
promise.
the ones that you bring to us. So if questions arise for you, use the Q&A feature on the right side. You'll see that question mark and ask a question in there, and we'll be able to address them as they come up. You can vote questions up. You can't vote them down. You can vote them up, and we'll try to get the top voted questions answered.
Okay, yes. So your questions are welcome and appreciated, but we're going to start with a question from us to you. So there's going to be a little poll that pops up here in a second. We're curious where you are in your psychedelic journey. So we got a few, it's a multiple choice poll, but if none of these apply to you, then you could also just drop something custom, something personalized in the chat. We're very curious. Some people are here with a lot of experience. Maybe some of you are even practitioners, facilitators. Some are just curious, looking at what the possibilities are. And some of you are ready to take this dive and are just trying to confirm, the blind spots that maybe you have. So let us know what you think. And that'll be helpful for us to make sure that we're hitting on the right topics and make this the most valuable 90 minutes it can be for you.
It's really fun
And
watching people win.
yeah. And also, after you put in your answer to the poll, I'd love to know where people are dialing in from. So you can say hello in the chat and maybe your location if you're comfortable sharing that. It's always fun to see, when there are connections made from these sorts of events. You may find that there's a neighbor here that you can become friends with, build a relationship with. Okay, Colorado Springs. I imagine there will be many Colorado people, maybe some Oregon, and then folks from all over the US, maybe even abroad who are interested in traveling for an experience like this. East Texas. All right. I live in Texas, but I'm in California right now with family. Okay. Hello, Katie. Hello, Rose, Jason, Eric, Michael, Mia, Donette, Drew. Susan says, "You two both look so young. Will you introduce yourselves and tell us your background?" Yes, we'll absolutely introduce ourselves. Before we get into introductions, first, I'd just like to say, by the end of this 90 minutes, our promise to you is you're going to know exactly how to access psychedelic therapy, which has become legal under state law in both Oregon and Colorado at this point, with other states potentially on the horizon. And at least for those two states and their different programs, what to expect at every step of the journey. But yeah, let's do some introductions. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Henry Winslow. I'm the founder of Tricycle Day, which is primarily an email newsletter that covers the psychedelic movement, research, policy reform, and the emerging industry. But there's some other elements to it too. We also have a directory of psychedelic practitioners, both in the regulated and underground spaces. There's a private community for psychedelic facilitators as well. And before I started Tricycle Day, the background that I bring to this work is, like many people working in the psychedelic sphere, I had a profound personal experience that opened my curiosity in a lot of ways. But even prior to that, my background that brought the interest to psychedelics to me was spiritual practice. I'd been a devoted yoga practitioner for many, many years and a full-time yoga teacher for some time. And really that was what it was about for me, not the mental health narrative that is so predominant today. It was about self-discovery and spiritual exploration. And yet, the mental health piece is so important, and even other aspects of healthcare where psychedelics are finding, to researchers are finding that psychedelics have application. I also have, some experience in the healthcare and pharmaceutical space in my professional background. So it's a pretty interesting time to be working in psychedelics as the healthcare and the medical collide with the spiritual and mystical. But Niko, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Niko Skievaski. I live in Boulder, Colorado. Have two children, and I've been using psychedelics for the better part of a decade, really to be a better human, to be a better leader, and to look so young. Um, but yeah, my background's in healthcare technology, and I through that experience worked in the traditional healthcare setting and built software companies in that space. And yeah, use psychedelics to really understand the impact that that company was having on the world and what we were building there. A few years ago, I was able to use psychedelics to really work within my identity to understand that it was time to leave that company and move on to the next thing. And so that's what I did, and really wanted to figure out how do I use my skill set in building software and building markets to help serve this emerging space of psychedelics. And so Althea is a company that I founded with a couple of co-founders a little over a year ago. We provide software that's used by facilitators and centers in the regulated psychedelic space, which is Colorado and Oregon right now. We have about 75% of the market using it. And the insights that we gained from measuring outcomes, from understanding those practitioners, we use to help potential clients of theirs navigate the landscape and find the right facilitator, find the right center that meets their needs based on based on what they're looking for. So we've been working in the space as it's been emerging in the state regulated models.
Nice. Excellent. We also have two panelists who will be joining us today, but since we're not quite ready for them, maybe we'll save their introductions for a little bit later. Does that sound all right, Niko?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we have facilitators / center operators from both Oregon and Colorado who will be coming on a little bit later. But before we get to their insight and their input, I would like to speak to Niko a little bit to just get the lay of the land here. So, Niko, for the benefit of everyone listening, let's start with the bigger picture. Oregon and Colorado both do offer legal psilocybin services at this point, but their models have some important differences. Can you break down what those key differences are and maybe how Colorado has built on what Oregon pioneered?
Yeah, absolutely. So Colorado, or Oregon, that is, launched a psilocybin therapy program a few years ago. And it really laid the groundwork for state regulated models. The Oregon market, since they've been doing it for a few years, is more mature. And within the state regulated system, the state licenses facilitators to actually sit with you while you're doing your journey. And these are people trained in holding space and keeping you safe and reducing risks. They license centers, which are the actual brick and mortar places where you go to do this. They also license the cultivators of the medicine, so people who are growing the mushrooms or creating products from them, and labs that test them. So the medicine that's used in these spaces are lab tested, and you know exactly what's in them. You know the potency of them. You can really understand the strength of them, which is, I think, very different than if you've used it in a less rigorous setting where you're not quite sure. You take a mushroom and not sure exactly what's in it. Colorado is the next iteration of that state program. We're going to see more iterations in the years to come with New Mexico and Iowa and some other states coming online. But Colorado's program launched in June, so it's still fairly new. And some of the, there's lots of nuanced differences in the regulations, of course. But one of the key differences in Colorado is that we have what are called clinical facilitators. And so clinical facilitators have another license, like they might be a social worker or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner. And they're actually allowed to use both of those licenses at the same time. And the clinical facilitators are typically seeing clients who are dealing with more severe mental health issues, or might have some comorbidities or complex medications that may complicate things. And so Colorado just kind of added a layer of more of a medicalized approach in the regulatory model. But other than that, they're fairly consistent across both states. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the point around the consistency of the product, because I think that's something that people may not even know that they don't know, right? Often you hear people use like weights of dried mushroom to talk about the actual. They say psilocybin, 300 milligrams of psilocybin, when in fact they mean 300 milligrams of dried mushroom, which could have a huge variability in the concentration of the active molecule. So it's pretty cool that there is a rigorous testing process for this, so people can know what they're going to expect to the degree that that's possible with a psychedelic experience, right? And then the clinical facilitator difference with Colorado versus Oregon, I think it's worth at least clarifying that in Oregon, a licensed facilitator may also have another medical license, but it's prohibited by the state to commingle those practices, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who can access these programs in each of the states, and who cannot? What sort of requirements are there in place to keep people safe?
Yeah, so there's a couple of baseline requirements that you have to meet. You have to be over 21, so an adult, 21 or over. But you also have to pass a safety screening, which really looks for counterindicated conditions or medicines that you might be taking. And in Colorado, another kind of part of the more medicalized approach is that based on that screening, you might have to get a consult with an actual medical provider to ensure that you can be safe in this setting. But other than that, it's fairly open. So there's no residency requirements, which means you can travel from out of state into Colorado or Oregon to do it. In fact, in Oregon, a large proportion of the people seen there come from out of state. And so some tourism into the state to do that. You don't need a diagnosis, so you can use these medicines for whatever reason you want, whether that's for mental health or for spirituality or creativity or productivity or getting out of a rut or grief or all sorts of reasons we're seeing people using them. So it's a fairly open program that even though it has the flavor of being medicalized with supervision and licensing and all of that, it's not, you don't need a diagnosis to do it.
Okay. And, a question that I'm sure is on a lot of people's mind, how much does this cost? What sort of price ranges do we see for an experience and everything that surrounds the experience?
Yeah, so it's not cheap. This is a novel therapy, and while outcomes are looking really promising in clinical trials and in research at med schools, it's not covered by insurance right now, so you'd be expected to pay out of pocket. And the primary cost of this therapy is actually the time spent with your facilitator. They're often spending 10 plus hours with you over a few different meetings. You're going to be doing preparation, potentially a few different meetings of preparation, the actual journey itself, which can last 4, 6, 8 hours, and then integration after that. A meeting or two with integration. And so there's a lot of time spent. In Oregon, the average prices that we've been seeing are right around $2,500. There are some places that can offer it on the less expensive end, and certainly some places on the higher end as well. So about a $1,000 to $3,000 range. Many facilitators will offer sliding scales based on your need. And if you're looking to reduce costs, there are also opportunities to do it in groups, which of course allows one facilitator to work with multiple people, and so it shares some of that cost. Beyond the cost of the actual facilitator, there's the cost of renting the space, so the actual center that's used to operate in, and then the medicine itself, which is a couple $100. And typically, much like cannabis, you're going to pay for the medicine in cash. And so oftentimes you can, pay with credit card for the rest, and then you bring a couple $100 in cash to pay for the actual medicine, to keep it off the kind of bank ecosystems, since it's still federally illegal, but kind of operating within the state regulated frameworks, much like cannabis has done for the past decade plus.
Okay. And so the room rental is paid by the client.
Yeah. Well,
So
and
all in, what's like a rough cost then?
yeah, so all in, that's what I was saying. All in is around $1,000 to $3,000.
Okay.
Yeah, and different facilitators and different centers may bundle things for you. So you'll have to talk to your facilitator about that and determine who you're going to pay and when. But there's at most 3 payments, but sometimes a center will just lump them all together and say flat fee is $2,500.
Okay. And then timeline wise, like let's say someone gets the answers they need by the end of this presentation and they say, I want to move forward. What's a realistic timeline from the decision to actually having that session?
Yeah, so there's a couple factors that play into that. You're going to need to find a facilitator, which we'll talk more about how we can do that, how things to consider in that process. So that can, it might be the first facilitator you meet, you feel really great about and want to work with. And then it really gets down to getting you ready for it. And so we'll talk a little bit about preparation as well, but you'll need at least a couple sessions, at least one session to do preparation ahead of the actual journey. And then, logistics around scheduling the actual journey itself. And so I would say at the quickest, you're probably looking to a week or so. If you have to travel, that's another consideration. But I think realistically, once you find a facilitator, you're probably going to schedule a couple weeks out. Really, they'll give you some homework on how to prepare for it appropriately, how to make sure you have a good support system in place to make sure you have the best experience. So it's not something that I think it should be rushed into. And most facilitators will actually discourage you from rushing into it and make sure you are approaching it with a lot of care and thought. And so we'll hear from our facilitator guests joining us today to get their take on that too, because that's what I've heard from most facilitators we talk to.
Okay. Yeah. On that topic of not rushing into it, I imagine that the reason why is because, or why you wouldn't want someone to rush into the experience is that maybe they have misaligned expectations about what is possible. So, on that topic, are there common misconceptions that you're aware of, you're hearing from people about these programs that you want to sort of set the record straight on before we go any deeper?
Yeah. So, I think a lot of people, it's easy to lump this into like cannabis because it's kind of a similar regulatory framework in that it's not, it's federally illegal, but state legal. But psychedelic assisted therapy is not about getting high and having a good time. It can be joyous, it can be fun, but it can also be a lot of work and it can be really hard, especially if you're dealing with mental health issues. It's something that will force you to look at them straight in the face. And so, it's not getting high. It's not going on a fun journey. It's real work. And I think that's a big misconception that I hear about sometimes in the space. It's also not a retail program. This isn't something where you can buy mushrooms and take them home. This is a supervised use program in both of these states. And so what that means is, you are buying mushrooms, but you're taking them and you're under the supervision of a licensed facilitator and doing that. And then another misconception is really around facilitators themselves. Some of them are therapists, but they're not all therapists. And some of them may be spiritual or even call themselves shamans, but they're not all shamans either. And so their role and what they're trained in, what they're licensed for, is to hold space for you in a safe way, in typically a non-directive way, and manage the logistics around it, mitigate risks, support integration, which may include working with your therapist or may include working with your spiritual guidance that you have in your life. And those are great support systems outside of this. But your facilitator, they may offer those types of services, but that's not explicitly what they're licensed to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's get practical and go a little deeper on that point then. The Venn diagram of different types of facilitators and their complementary approaches and positioning, like it leaves a lot of room to decide what works for you and what you think would be the right fit. So once people understand the basics of what these programs are and what they are not, how do they start thinking about looking for a facilitator or even a center that's appropriate for them? How do you go about picking someone? What should they be looking for to vet the quality and alignment to their needs?
Yeah. There's certainly logistical considerations about where they are and stuff like that. But I think the most important thing is trust. There's a concept in therapy called the therapeutic alliance. And that's crucial in this space. When you're under the influence of psilocybin, you're in an extremely vulnerable state of mind. And while doing it in a regulated environment, that can create some trust because there's oversight. These people are licensed. The medicine is tested and all of that. But beyond that, it's really how you relate to the person who's sitting with you. How do you like their style, their approach, their communication with you? And so getting to know them up front, I think, is really important to understand how you feel within all of that. And then beyond that, you might have some other considerations, like if you're dealing with a certain mental health condition like PTSD or grief or depression or anxiety or some of these other conditions that psilocybin has been shown to be effective with, it'll be a good idea to see how your practitioner, how the facilitator has worked with others who have similar conditions, what their approach is to that, if they have experience and specialization in certain areas, is another thing that you'll want to consider. And beyond that, the setting that they're going to bring you into, many facilitators will work within certain centers, and so you want a setting that feels supportive, something that a place where you'll feel comfortable. Most facilitators will actually tell you to talk to a few facilitators to get a sense of who you feel really comfortable with and who you might not, so you can understand kind of some of the differences out there in their approaches.
Okay. Drew raises a good question here. You spoke to actually building a relationship maybe, or having a conversation at the very least with a facilitator to get a sense of whether it's the right fit. Is that part of the process that many of these centers offer? Is that something that you need to kind of do on your own way? How would you have that conversation?
Yeah. So yeah, if you go to an actual center and ask to talk to a few different facilitators, I'm sure they'll recommend some for you, and they'll introduce you to them. There's also the actual state websites will show you a list of everyone who's licensed, and so you can kind of start from scratch there if you want to just poke around. We'll go into some of the resources later that Althea offers, but we have a directory where you can kind of search on keywords and try to understand who these people are. And we also have a service to actually help you match with a facilitator based on an intake form that you can fill out to share what you're dealing with, and we'll actually find facilitators that have that experience and background. So yeah, it can be intimidating process, but I would say the best thing to do is just talk to one person and see what that feels like, and that'll make it easier to talk to the next one. And these licensed facilitators are a lot easier to find than the world that many of them have come from, which is an underground environment. We have Teresa on stage.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. Teresa. Sorry about my weird tech issues.
Yeah, we were frantically trying to get your attention in the back room. Glad that you got it sorted. Niko and I are still going over some of the basics right now, but in a few minutes we're gonna want to pick your brain around some of the specific details around Colorado. So you can hang here with us for a little bit, or if you want, you can hang back in the green room. Up to you.
When I'm in the green room, I can't hear you talk.
Oh, okay. Then yeah,
hang out here.
Then hang here.
Okay. I mean, can I turn my camera off so I'm not distracting? There we go. Okay, go.
Yes, you can. All right. Yeah. Okay. I'm seeing some conversation, some chitter chatter in the chat here about other medicines. So, also just want to clarify, one difference between Oregon and Colorado is that in Colorado, there's also the Natural Medicine Health Act also includes a personal use provision. So the facilitated model that we're talking about today is limited exclusively to psilocybin mushrooms for now. There is some talk about ibogaine being the next medicine to be included in that program, but it's not currently available, and it won't be in the near future. But personal use and sharing is protected of other natural medicines, including plants containing DMT, non-peyote cactus, including that contain mescaline, and ibogaine. So hopefully that answers the confusion there. So Niko, what does preparation mean in this context? What does someone need to do before their session, whether that's medical, psychological, logistical, and what role does the facilitator or service center play in that process?
Yeah, preparation is really important to be going into these types of experiences with the right mindset. And your facilitator will certainly walk you through how to prepare. There's obviously logistics, there's documents, there's legal aspects in this regulated model, lots of forms that you'll need to fill out and sign that will make sure you have all the information around what you're getting into. And these are, a lot of these legal forms are prescribed by the state. So Oregon and Colorado, the regulators make sure that clients sign the same forms, and so they're understanding how it's explained to them in a consistent way. But beyond that, there's a lot, medically, physiologically, psychologically that is important to prepare. There's certainly an aspect of intention setting that many facilitators find important in it, and so it's asking you to reflect on why you're approaching this type of medicine. Are you seeking healing or insight or closure or growth? Trying to understand what you're bringing into it, because as you're setting intentions, you're sort of priming yourself for those things to come up during the session. Making sure you have the right mindset. So making sure that you understand what to expect, what the medicine might feel like coming on, so you're not turned off by it or afraid of it. You want to approach it with curiosity and openness and trust. And so making sure that there's the right expectation there will help with that mindset. And then the support around you, which might be your existing therapists or mental health providers. It might be your family, friends, loved ones who will be supporting you afterwards. During the preparation process, it's really important to make sure that that your community understands what you're doing and will be there for you when you need them on the other side, and that you're going back into an environment that will have the space for you to integrate your learnings. And so really integration, which we'll certainly talk about as well, starts in that preparation phase, so you understand before the journey that you'll need the space afterwards to properly integrate.
Okay. So yeah, let's go to integration then. What does good integration support look like? How can you plan for that in advance? I'm sure that many of our audience members today will not be surprised to hear that integration is really key to some of the outcomes that people are looking for when they have these experiences. So planning for that ahead of time can make all the difference. So what can people do around planning for integration?
Yeah, and integration, just to kind of define it, is you'll likely have insights that come up during the psychedelic experience, and integration is making sense of those, is figuring out how those might transform into the way you go about your life. And it's often a step that's overlooked, but it is frequently discussed as really the key to transformation in these types of experiences. It's where the real work happens, and it's not sexy. It's not fast. It often unfolds over weeks or months. And I think the main thing here is to give yourself the space to integrate. And so while a psychedelic experience might be done in an afternoon or a morning, you'll want to give yourself at least a few days to understand how that experience can fold back into your life, what parts of your life you may want to change, what parts you may want to double down on. whenever I do a psychedelic journey, I try to give myself the next week of no meetings, of open space, of time in nature. And your facilitator will recommend different tools that might be effective for you. You might have these tools in your life already, like journaling or some other sort of mind body practice, whether that might be yoga or exercise or being in nature. Or some sort of creative expression, are all different ways that people have worked with integration. And as I mentioned earlier, making sure that your community support, your therapists, your peers, your family and loved ones understand what you're doing, and when you come out of it, are in a place where they can support you as well, where there's not a lot of pressure being put on you in the day or two or three following a journey like this. Integration is something that, like in our culture especially, we like things that are quick and solve a problem, which psychedelics can be a wonderful start to that, but really where the transformation happens is afterwards, in that integration period, which may last days, weeks, months, years even.
Yeah, in these conversations about the importance of preparation and integration, I'm always sort of struck by how much overlap there is between the two. Many of the things that beget, a transformative integration period can also help you in the preparation, and also help you irrespective of whether you have a psychedelic experience, creating space for internal reflection, having a community that you can drop into for deep conversation and processing of challenges and questions in your life. So, in my opinion, like if you're going to walk away from anything in this conversation, whether you choose to have a facilitated psychedelic experience, like what can you take away from these best practices from integration to support you? I think that's a win regardless. So, we touched a little bit on the folks who are coming from out of state, but is there anything that they should be considering that we haven't spoken to directly?
Yeah, so certainly beyond the actual journey, you're going on a physical journey as well, and I would say at a minimum, it's a 3-day trip, like at minimum. You probably don't want to be traveling on the day that you're actually using the medicine, so that's probably coming in the day before at the shortest, and then leaving the day after. But having some extra time on the back end might be helpful as well, so you're not just traveling right afterwards. And that also goes into additional costs beyond the session fee. So as we talked about, there's the actual paying for the therapy and the center and the medicine. But if you're traveling from out of state, we have to take into account travel and hotel and meals and things of that sort. So it can get pricey, and it's a big consideration for the space, is how do we actually help reduce those costs and increase accessibility for this type of medicine that right now is really out of budget for some people. And so we'll be talking about some of the things that we're working on along those lines with the Forward Fund and stuff in a bit as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We're going to bring on our panelists in a minute here, but before we do that, I want to make sure that we're addressing any questions that are in the chat. I did see, so if you have any, feel free to drop them in there and we'll try to tackle a couple of those. One that I have seen some back and forth about is, how do we know that the medicine is of good quality and purity? So in addition to the licenses for facilitators, there are several other licenses. There's a facilitator license, there's a center operator license, there's also a cultivator license, and separately a analytical testing lab license. And that model is pretty consistent from state to state, with the nuance of the clinical facilitators in Colorado that doesn't exist in Oregon. But I think it's important to point that out because there are sort of checks and balances there, right? You have to be licensed to cultivate medicine, but it's a separate entity that's going to assess the quality and potency, so that everybody knows what they're getting.
And I think when I did my first journey it was in Portland in a service center there, I think the biggest difference for me was that I could actually hold the package of the mushrooms and see the lab results on it and see what was the potency of psilocybin. And it was the first time I actually understood how much psilocybin I was taking. Because with mushrooms that you might, that your friend might give you, that they grow in a shoebox under their bed, there's highly variability in the potency of psilocybin, which is the active, psychoactive ingredient within a psychoactive mushroom. And so that is clearly called out and defined in these lab results. And so within this regulated space, they have to use medicine that's provided by these licensed channels that are tested. And so you can really depend on them to have what they say is in the label.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's bring on Scott and Teresa.
Awesome. I'm pumped for this. So let's, here we go. Oh yeah. Brady Bunch for you.
Yes. Okay. We've got Scott and Teresa. Before I go into more questions, let's take a minute to meet you guys. Scott, you first. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? We don't need a life story, but 30 seconds, a minute introduction, please.
Yeah. So I'm the father of 5 kids, and maybe about 5 years ago, I found myself accomplishing all the things that I thought you should accomplish to be happy, and I was significantly not happy. I found psilocybin. Literally over the course of a couple sessions, changed my life, and decided that I wanted to bring that back out and show other people how profound it can be. It really is amazing. So anyways, I got my license. I did a couple sessions at other service centers, felt like I could do better. And so I opened up my own service center, and here I am.
Okay, wonderful. And Teresa, how about you?
Hi, I'm Teresa Crossland. I own Happy Rebel Healing with my best friend, Erin Farr. I've been a psychotherapist for 20 years. I've worked with MAPS for the last decade with the MDMA for PTSD trials. When the FDA was not in our favor, I pivoted to psilocybin, flew to Oregon, got my facilitator license, and then, like I said, with my best friend, started this little micro healing center in my psychotherapy office. So we were one of the first 5 licensed in the state of Colorado, and it's been a wild journey.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
So Scott, I'll start with you. Since Oregon was really the pioneer here, they were the first state to come online. Can you walk us through what happens, from the first moment that someone contacts MindTrek or you directly to their follow-up sessions? What does that client journey look like?
So we do it a little bit different in that we only have a couple facilitators at our center. And so when somebody emails or calls in, they talk to Alexis, who's also a facilitator and my partner in this center. And she kind of goes through, we figure out a little bit what they're coming here for, what they're trying to change, what's different. And then really we decide, okay, you better work with Scott, or you should work with Larissa, or I'll take you as a sitter. And it works a little different. Most other places, you go to the service center website, there's a list of 20 facilitators, and you kind of go through and you start looking to see who might be good. You contact them, you set up interviews, things like that, which are all still good, and we still do. But it's a little quicker, a little easier. To kind of get through the process. You don't have to maneuver quite through so many people and bios, if you will.
Okay, great. And what's something that about the Oregon program that tends to surprise first-time clients? Like, is there any typical education that you find you have to do with new people when they're coming through?
Yeah, at the beginning, it was mostly about cost. Why is it so expensive? I can grow mushrooms and, but it's a significantly different experience, in this therapeutic setting than it is when you do it at home or you do it in a recreational type of way. So we have to describe that process, why it's different than the recreational dose, why walking through the forest is wonderful, but this is different than that, and there's a cost associated with that. So it's mostly, was about the cost. Now, it definitely seems like folks are more educated. They're definitely diving deeper into the research, figuring out why it might work for them, why it might not work for them. So really now it seems like the conversations are more in depth about their issues, what they're hoping to get from this. And we walk them through, we can't share other client stories, but we have experiences that help us help them navigate where they should be. And sometimes it's with us and sometimes it's somewhere else, right? So we're not always the right facilitator for everyone. Yeah, but that's probably the biggest thing. Most people are struck at the amount of facilitators to choose from, and that's really daunting for them. I think Althea, with their new program or their kind of directory, is going to be pretty good to help people navigate the space. It definitely seems like that's the harder thing to work through at the moment.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that people are coming with more, baseline awareness so that they can dive into those deeper discussions around their personal needs.
Yeah.
But I did see, even a couple of bumps in the chat about, why is it so expensive? So what's your answer to that question? How do you explain that?
So we're one of the cheaper, probably, or less expensive service centers. I think we're roughly almost half of what you said that the average was. It's the licensing is expensive, the bureaucracy is expensive. Again, it's still a Schedule I drug federally, so it creates issues on the background for a small business, right? Insurances are hard to get, places to lease are harder to get. It all just creates an environment that is incredibly risky financially, right? You just don't. Nobody's making a lot of money at this. Everybody that's in this space is doing it because they love to help people. Maybe some pharmaceutical company is going to make a lot of money, but it won't be us just sitting with folks and helping them through the process.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go to you, Teresa. Colorado really had the benefit of seeing Oregon up and running for a couple of years. And I know that now you mentioned you're one of the first to secure one of the micro healing center licenses. How does the healing center approach work compared to the service center model in Oregon? What key differences are you paying attention to? And then within Colorado's model, what's the difference between a full healing center versus a micro healing center like the one you have?
Sure. So when people come to us, the first thing we have them do is just fill out a background form, checking for basic information to see about if they're a right fit for this. If everything looks good on there, then we go to an initial consult. I offer a free initial consultation. I think it's really important that people have the information that they need, that we have the information that we need from them to make sure that this is going to be safe and effective and they're in the right place and the right time. From there, we connect them to one of our team. And so we have amassed a team of facilitators that, I mean, when I sit with my team of facilitators, I am so impressed by their breadth and depth of experience and education. We've got people experienced in traditional Chinese medicine, end-of-life care, coaching, addiction, herbalism. We have a doctor of acupuncture. I've been a trauma therapist for 20 years, so I'm trained in EMDR and IFS. We have a nurse practitioner who specializes in women's health. So it's really important to us that we match people to their right person. From there, we do an intake and screening, and we send the first 2 forms from Althea. We are so grateful to Althea, honestly. The system has been so complicated. Just getting this off the ground, all of the pieces, and having Althea behind us with all of the documentation and a system to keep everything straight has just been such a blessing. So we send the first 2 assessments, which is a baseline assessment and a safety assessment. So it measures general mood, anxiety, depression, general health questions, mental health questions, pharmacology questions. It then sends us back the results. It shows us red flags and yellow flags. From there, if everything is looking looking well, then they can go on to the screening with their facilitator. If there are red flags or yellow flags, then we can direct them to a medical professional, a psychiatrist. They might need to taper off medication. There might be other considerations just around their specific mental health issues. At everything that's happened up to this point, we haven't charged any money. It's only after they've completed these screening tools and we move on to the intake that we take a deposit. The state requires one preparatory session. As a therapist, I find that a little disturbing. I think preparation is so much more important. So we do 2 prep sessions on top of the intake and screening. We've also designed a preparation booklet to help people just get the information so that when they come in, they already have some information. So they're prepared to ask questions, and we can really focus on safety and relationship and creating a trusting space, because this work can be really intense. Then they do their medicine session. We do 2 integrations, one the next day and then one a week later. So that's how our healing center process works. The second thing you asked was the difference between the micro and the regular healing center. I've got a boring answer and I've got a more personal answer. So the boring answer is a micro healing center. We're limited in how much psilocybin we can have on site. Our surveillance and security is a hair less stringent than a healing center, and our fees are a little bit lower to the state. But on a personal note, having the ability to have a micro healing center leaves this option available to individuals and small businesses, because most people don't actually have the kind of money that it takes to get a business like this off the ground. And so my best friend and I, we sort of dipped into our savings and we're able to create this place. We were able to use my office as opposed to renting a big space, which can get really complicated. Micro healing centers tend to be a little smaller. We just have 2 offices and one bigger room for small groups.
Okay. I see a message in the chat. It sounds like there are gatekeepers who decide if you get the medicine or not. I'll take a stab at responding to that, but if you have additional thoughts, to me, what it sounds like is that as a service center or a healing center, you want to be careful about who you're working with, because screening helps you ensure that people are coming out better than they started versus having adverse effects. And aside from that, at least in Colorado, the personal use provision does protect people's right to work with medicine directly outside of a therapeutic relationship. But Teresa, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I can certainly understand the concern. I can give you a personal anecdote. I was contacted by somebody who reached out for a medicine session, and I found out that he was struggling with PTSD, addiction, suicidal ideation, and he was not connected to a therapist. So from an ethical standpoint, the idea of doing a session with somebody who doesn't have the support and resources to do care beforehand and afterward feels really, really dangerous. What we don't want is for people to open up experiences that they aren't equipped to handle. So when this happened and I had to turn him down, I realized what we needed also was a network of psychedelically friendly or trained therapists, not just in Colorado, but all over the United States, so that if somebody contacts me and they are struggling with significant mental health issues and they're not connected to a therapist, this isn't about saying, nope, sorry, good luck with that. This is about connecting them to the right people so that then they collectively can figure out when it's appropriate for them to do medicine work.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
if
thank you.
Chime in there too. There's a great question on the questions tab that Eric posed here around, and it's really related to this, that the integration period or what's required in these state regulations is really short. I think that it's required to have one integration session. And so Scott, can you speak to integration and how folks should plan to seek and find integration post journey, whether that's with their facilitator or beyond?
Yeah, you know what? Teresa was right. The support that is required for this, especially if you're going, you're really looking for big changes, it can be uncomfortable afterwards. And so, for me personally, we typically will do an integration. We'll check in the same day. We'll do an integration within 2 or 3 days. But I'm available forever. I still have clients who will email me, call me, check in. Hey, Scott, this is going on for me. Is this normal? What should I do with this? And I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed therapist. I am just a guy that this worked for. And so I'm supportive and I'm there, but we also, when there's folks that have significant issues, we also want them to have a therapist. So we're asking them, do you have a therapist? You should set up an appointment with your therapist within the week, after your session. When you get back home, are you alone? Or are you with family? What's your support network? It really is important. But a lot of somebody's end result is also very much affected by the amount of preparation that was done up front. And preparing somebody for two separate things, right? So there's the preparation for the actual session. How do I get through? I just took a whole bunch of mushrooms. I'm feeling kind of weird. How do I get through this and get to the end of it? That's a different preparation than, okay, what are the things that you're trying to work on and how can we support you before and support you after with those as well?
Nice. Thank you for bringing that question, Niko. I realize that there's a whole separate column for questions that have been officially submitted. So if you could keep an eye on that, that'd be awesome. So let's go into open field questions for the two of you, Scott and Teresa. One of the things that I'm trying to help people with is for the folks who don't live in either Oregon or Colorado, they may be deciding like, okay, which of these two avenues do I want to go down? In your view, are there practical differences that should be, meaningful factors in how they make that decision? Or is it really just about, finding the center and facilitator that they most resonate with?
I think it's about connecting with your facilitator, right? The facilitator's job is to not just make sure that you're safe in this space, but to make sure that you know that you're safe in this space, which can be two completely different things, right? So it really is a connection between a lot of the people call through the service center, but the real relationship is with the facilitator. And that's a relationship that you have to be comfortable with. You can't be 90% comfortable with that relationship. If you're 10% off, you need to move on and find somebody that you're 100% comfortable with. And so I think that's pretty important.
Okay. Anything to add there, Teresa? You agree? Disagree?
100%. Mushrooms are so interesting. You can't hide anything with this medicine. If there is any awkwardness, bad feelings, mistrust, paranoia, it shows up in the room. So that relationship between facilitator and client is the most important. I feel really lucky in that the healing centers that have come up just, at the beginning of all of this, we have been meeting monthly. And instead of this, what could be a competitive thing, it has been really collaborative, and we're sharing information and we know each other. And so if I were to meet somebody that didn't feel like it was a good fit, I have resources to send them to a different center, to a different facilitator. And I think everybody in this business, and maybe this sounds cheesy or cliche, but we actually really care about outcomes and people's well-being. This is not a great business model. This is about healing, and that means making sure that people are in the right place with the right people.
Okay. We've spoken to cost already. So aside from the cost concern, are there common patterns you see in terms of the fears that people come with or concerns? What do people tend to come to you with that they want to work through before they even make the decision to actually do the medicine work with you?
I think a lot of it, a lot of people think that they're going to go crazy, right? That they're going to take this medication and they're going to be worse afterwards, right? And that is exactly why screening up front is so important, because there is a certain segment of folks that don't do well, that on the other side of this will actually be worse than they went into it. And so we're very particular. We walk through the questionnaires. We have multiple conversations. So Alexis has a conversation. I have a conversation. And between the two of us, we've done a lot of sessions. And so, we start to pick up on the nuances, the red flags, the yellow flags. When somebody says this, oh, you know what, it feels like maybe it's this. And so you dive deeper. It is, but it really is, the biggest fear, I think, is that they're just afraid of the space, because literally nobody can articulate the actual space. It's impossible to do it. And, everybody on this panel has done it, I assume, but I can tell by the way that they smile at different things and some of the verbiage that they use. But we know that no matter how much I try to describe what the space is like, it's not going to do it justice. It's going to be different for you than it was for me, potentially. This session might be super easy and you might float through it and have a wonderful time. And then the next session, it might be the awfulest thing you've ever gone through. And then afterwards, you're like, well, maybe I'll do it again, right? And it's a hard thing to do. So really, at the end of the day, it's about building a relationship so that they trust me, right? That I hold their interests to heart, that I am doing this because I want them to be better, to feel better. I'm doing it because I felt better, and I still can't believe it. I couldn't go back to the 2019 Scott and convince them that I'd feel this way today. So, it's about, it all comes down to relationship. It really does.
I want to chime in with Jenna's question from the question tab here around informing clients of the risks. We've been talking a little bit about this, but is there an established way that either the regulators have shared on how you inform clients of risk, or that you inform clients of risk? Because there are risks, we've been talking about them, but how is that done? And then is there any requirements around reporting adverse events to public health departments, so we can start to understand, what's the prevalence of adverse events and what types of people experience adverse events?
So yes, we are required to report all adverse events within 24 hours. So they are definitely logging that. Here in Colorado, we're still kind of at the beginning. So as far as I know, nothing has been reported, but as this continues and gets bigger, I'm sure that things will happen. But they definitely have systems in place to keep logs of that. Sort of to continue on with what Scott was saying in terms of risk and client fears is really the unknown aspect of this work. You just don't know what you're going to get and how it's going to go. Having come from the clinical trials in the MDMA space, there is something very consistent about how MDMA works. And then you have mushrooms, which is this sort of living entity that has its own intelligence. And not to sound too wooey, but I mean, this has been used for thousands of years. And there is something special and magical and unknown about how mushrooms work. And so that intelligence, mixed with the inner healing intelligence of the client, mixed with what I am bringing to the room and to this space and to the container, sort of come together in this synergistic effect to give some type of wisdom. And sometimes that wisdom is beautiful and wonderful and blissful, and sometimes it is deeply uncomfortable. I personally have had deeply uncomfortable experiences, but I have never come out of an experience without having some sort of wisdom that is meaningful to me. And so for me, that's the risk that I talk about with people is that you don't know what you're going to get. But trusting the wisdom inside of you, the wisdom in the mushroom, the space that we've created, it will give you something. It might not come in the package that you were looking for.
Yeah, well said. I had a conversation with someone once who described ingesting psilocybin as, here are the contents of your subconscious. Good luck. And it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but there's some truth to that. And of course, you can shift the balance from luck into a little bit more structure with the skill of a facilitator and someone who can hold a safe container and control set and setting. But that uncertainty piece is a big part of it. And I would even venture to say that the client's ability to surrender into that uncertainty can sometimes mediate the healing.
Mm-hmm.
So I love your response to that. I just wanted to, underscore it.
So I was just going to add in Oregon, because we also track adverse events, and there's been very few over the 2 years, very few. And I would tell you that from what I can tell, most of those are people in the space. They're not feeling safe, and something that makes them need to go out. So some of them have gone, or like the medics have been called and things like that. But like I want to say it was 12 in thousands of sessions, right? So it's a pretty low number, and I would say in many of those cases it's more about the preparation for the space than it was about the space. So.
Yeah, Teresa, you mentioned sort of in passing that mushrooms have been used in various contexts for thousands of years, right? So I don't want to pretend, and I think everybody here knows that the state-sanctioned regulated programs in Oregon and Colorado are certainly not the only way one can come by an experience like this, right? So in your opinion, what makes someone a good candidate for regulated psilocybin therapy versus other approaches that are out there, ceremonial, indigenous, even underground? How do they decide that this is the path I want to go on?
Yeah, I mean, I feel incredibly lucky to live in Colorado where they have allowed personal use. And when we entered into the regulated space, my partner and I were talking about just the cost of this. It's something that most of us are deeply uncomfortable with. I mean, my entire community has been growing mushrooms for years, and mushrooms are prolific in Colorado. And so there's something that feels really uncomfortable about how much we have to charge to cover our insurance and our licensing fees and rent and everything. And so one of the things that we did on our resources page was actually highlight that there is a personal use model here in Colorado. And we even linked to a trip sitter's guide that, if you feel like this isn't the right model for you, that you can research this on your own, you can pair up with a friend, you can read this book, you can get your own mushrooms. As a therapist, I have run into many clients who are very fascinated by this, but would only work under the regulated model. They want to be in a licensed healing center. They want to be with trained facilitators. They want to be in regulated and tested medicine. So, I mean, in some ways, there's just an element of how risk averse you are. The community that I come from, we go see the Grateful Dead and fish, and there's nobody I know who would step into this model and pay what it costs to do this. But I have a handful of personal clients that this is the only way that they would do it.
Yeah.
It's very true. I think we've actually had clients that have had a significant experience with psychedelics at some point, but have never done it in a therapeutic style, right? Where they've been in concerts, nature, ceremonial type stuff. And it's a different experience for them, but it's the same for us. We get a lot of folks that wouldn't do this in any other way than a legal framework. They're just not interested in doing it underground, or it's still scary, right? You're doing a legal framework. It's still new. It's still scary. It's still different, and it's expensive. And I'm going to fly across the country. And it seems like, who would do that? Well, we all, when we get to a certain point, we'll do what it takes to feel better. So So it's really important that we screen folks to make sure that they're right for this, right? I have no desire for somebody to fly across the country, pay all this money, and not have an experience that was helpful. It's not what we do. So
Yeah. Yeah, it is still scary. It can still be scary, and I'm not an attorney, this is not legal advice, but I think it's worth mentioning also that while these programs are legal under state law, psilocybin and psilocin are still federally controlled substances, Schedule 1 under federal law. So,
yeah,
it's not perfect legal cover.
right,
Um,
right.
but
My
you raised an interesting. Oh, go ahead, Teresa.
Oh, I was just going to say that the first two people that I worked with in the state regulated model were people over 70 years old who flew in from other states. And
Yes.
so I think that, there are some older people out there who have been curious about this for years, and now that it's available to them, they're making that choice. And it's really beautiful, actually.
Mhm.
Teresa, I would
Yeah.
tell you that I thought our average client age would be 40s, 30s, 40s. It's been 60 plus is most of our
Mhm.
clients. A good percentage of them, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have suspected that most people who come to a service center and work in the licensed model are people who are relatively psychedelic naive. But you brought up an interesting point, Scott, that some people have had prior recreational experiences, maybe less intentional experiences, and are
Right.
coming to this because they want that structure and they want to have a different set and setting surrounding it. You don't necessarily need to give firm numbers, but do you have a rough idea of the breakdown of those 2 cohorts, like who's showing up?
Of naive versus experienced,
Yeah, yeah.
I would probably say it's 70% naive,
Okay.
30% with some experience, maybe 5% or less with lots of experience.
Mhm.
Um, but we had somebody who traveled all over Asia, doing involved in ceremonies and all this different stuff. And he came back and did it here, and he said this was nothing like those. So part of it, right, is about intention, right? Like you're at a point where you want to change something. Otherwise, you wouldn't be flying across the country paying the money and this thing that's still partially illegal. You want to change something, and it's super powerful for you to do that. You get to that point, and then you start looking, right, and then you have the intention that you need to do something afterwards. I think it helps. Niko you mentioned that you did it around a job change, right? Or I don't want to, but it can be very specific, right? It can be I have this issue that I'm struggling with. I want to figure it out, because there's nothing but truth when you take psilocybin. You don't always like it, but it's usually pretty true. Um, and then there's some folks that are just have this general, I'm just not happy and I need to figure it out. So
Yeah, the intention piece is huge. There's a famous Alan Watts quote, "When you get the message, hang up the phone," which is often interpreted like, okay, once you've had the psychedelic insight, you don't need to use psychedelics anymore. And while that may be true and everybody's different, Rick Doblin, I heard, had a really interesting retort to that, which was, yes, you get the message and you hang up the phone, but life goes on and you have new questions. And so, to your point, Scott, like maybe you're going through a transition in your life, and now that brings an entirely different question to
right,
your internal inquiry and how the medicine can assist you with that. So I love that framing.
yeah.
We'll come back around to both of you for some final thoughts. Oh, Niko, did you have another audience question you wanted
Yeah,
to
yeah.
bring up?
So from Mary Kay, I thought this one fit the topic really well. Have you done psilocybin alone? And what was the experience? Because what we've been talking about is doing with the facilitator. And why would you consider each?
Well, I have a story, just because one of my very first clients did a session with me, and then he went away, and a year later he calls me and he says, "Scott, I I got some mushrooms. I closed all the drapes. I turned on some music, and the doors were shut. I took care of everything, and it was the worst experience of my life. It was." He said it was awful, and he was laughing when he was saying it was awful, but there's something about knowing that somebody's got your back in this space, that somebody's taking care of every possible thing. My mind starts to go a little bit, sideways about something. There's somebody that can say, "Hey, let's bring it back. Let's lay back down. Let's put the eye mask back on, or why don't you think about your intention, or whatever that happens to be, that we redirect them. It's more important than you think. It really is.
All right, here's the flip side. I have done a ton of psilocybin alone, and really paid attention to what the difference is. I've rolled around on the floor in my own home. I've been out in the woods behind my house by myself, cuddled with my dogs. One of the things that stands out to me, and yes, what Scott said, it is really lovely to have somebody taking care of you. I know that for myself, when I'm in the presence of somebody else, there is part of my brain that is paying attention to them, that is concerned about them, that is concerned about their opinions, about the choices that I'm making. There's just a little added thing that's happening. And so one thing that I recognized by doing solo journeys is that it feels incredibly authentic. There is the observer effect that things under observation are changed. So I remember recognizing this, that like, wow, every choice that I am making is completely coming from inside of me. And there was a freedom to that, and an understanding of my own insides outside of any influence of somebody else. I mean, even just being with my husband, who I love, and we have had a ton of experiences together, but like just changing the music and then having the thought of like, well, does he want the,
you like the song?
want the music changed? Is now he unhappy about the music? And so, right. I appreciate all avenues of psychedelic exploration.
I think there's something to that, right? The separate presence does influence to some extent. Somebody might grab onto that and hold on to it, and so I can appreciate that. I'll have to go out and try that, Teresa. I'll let you know how it goes.
I mean, running through the woods by yourself, I'm just saying.
All right.
Amazing. Love that. Okay, Scott and Teresa, we'll come back to you in a little bit for some final thoughts. But in the interest of time, I want to bring it back over to Niko to walk us through, where Althea comes in this process from a client journey perspective. You've been watching this space evolve since pretty much, Oregon came online, and helping people navigate it. So show us the ropes.
Yeah. One of the things that we identified in working with facilitators and with centers in the space is that there's an all-time high awareness of psychedelics in society right now. It's, Oprah had a show on it. It was on 60 Minutes. It's talked about on NPR seemingly every day. The VA is lobbying to Congress about it, right? It's everywhere. But as soon as you try to figure out how do you actually find a facilitator, how do you find the resources to do it, unless you happen to find Scott or Teresa's website or some of the other facilitators' websites, it can be hard to understand what the landscape looks like and hard to navigate it. And so what Althea is trying to do is really help people navigate that landscape and find the right practitioners, find the right centers based on their needs. So we have a few resources that I want to share. We'll send a follow-up email that will also link out to these things. But I just want to show a few things in case you're trying to figure out what can you do today to start trying to find some of these resources. So one thing that was mentioned earlier is this directory. So the state regulators have directories of all of the practitioners. We basically just copied them and put them on a website that's easier to search and easier to find. And so you can go in here and search by location. You can search by keywords. So you could type depression or anxiety and find practitioners who focus on that. Oh, look, here's Scott's profile. So if you want to talk to Scott, there he is. And here's Happy Rebel and Teresa. Here's Aaron, who's all I've seen in the chat as well. So the practitioners are in here. You're able to go in and message them and start to build those relationships. So if you're looking to talk to folks, this is a really great place to look and to search. There were some questions I saw around just more resources around what it can be used for, different research studies. Basically, anytime these questions come up at Althea, we try to write a blog post on it. So we just looked at a bunch of research on using psilocybin for anorexia, for instance, or prolonged grief disorder. Yeah, so you can check out resources here, and we link out to the academic research that we're citing in it. And so there's a lot in there around how to actually, figure out if it's right for you. And as we've been talking about, none of these resources say it's right for everybody. And there's a lot of things to consider that it'll help you walk through what are some of the things to consider. And then we also have this link. It's linked throughout our website, Find a Facilitator. But this is really where you can fill out a questionnaire to determine what your next steps might be, and we'll actually connect you with practitioners in this space. And so if you're actually ready to find a facilitator, we'll ask you a few questions to determine, maybe you're dealing with grief and you want to go to Colorado. And these are just questions around your timeline, around what you're looking for. If you have preferences on, gender or experience or location or things like that. And then we use that information to find facilitators, and we'll introduce you to at least 2 or 3 facilitators that you can talk to that meet some of this. And so there's a link that Henry just popped up at the bottom of your screen to find a facilitator. And so if this is something you want to check out, that'll go directly to this, and we can try to find those resources. We've also been talking a lot about, I should also mention, so our system is used by facilitators to screen clients, to measure outcomes, to get a baseline pre-journey and post-journey look at what happened to their clients. And so what we do with that data, we don't sell the data or monetize it in any way. What we do with the data is actually use that to make these matches better. And so if you're someone who's dealing with severe treatment-resistant depression, we can try to look to see what other clients have come through the regulated space that may have been dealing with similar issues, and which facilitators have they worked with, and what did outcomes look like. And that's something that we use to inform how to get better matches here. So there's a lot of real world evidence being generated by these state programs. And I think it's really important to be able to utilize that information to drive better care and to inform facilitators and centers on how they can improve what clients work best with them, and also drive policy as this space emerges in the years to come. I also wanted to mention another resource. We've talked a lot about cost, and so we launched a program a few months ago with Tricycle Day, and it's what we affectionately call the Forward Fund, and we seeded it with capital and have essentially used it to pay for facilitator fees for psychedelic journeys. And so this describes how the fund works and all of that. But you essentially apply for funding. There's a bunch of FAQ down here, but you apply for funding, and it's based on your reported need, both from a psychological standpoint and a financial standpoint. And we draw a lottery once a month to award someone. And so we're not trying to assess need and pick the person who needs it the most. We try to get out of that. We try not to have to make those decisions, but we let the lottery, based on weights, determine who might get access to those funds. And of course, we accept donations, people who want to pay it forward, to contribute to that. And one of the great features about this that a lot of facilitators and clients enjoy is that the facilitator doesn't know that the Forward Fund has paid for their experience. And what that does is it removes the financial aspect from the container with your facilitator. They know that they get paid, and that's all. And you can just focus on the actual healing in the environment. So we will send out links to all of these things. And I'm going to kick it back over to Henry because he's got an exciting announcement along these lines as well.
Yes, I do. But before I make that announcement, I also just want to do a little round robin here and get some final thoughts from each of the panelists. In 30 seconds or so, what's one final parting piece of advice that you would give to anyone in our audience who may be considering going down this path and pursuing regulated psilocybin therapy? And let's start with you, Scott. Oh, you're muted. Let me see if I can unmute you.
Oh, there we go. I got you. Sorry, it's me. I think that the thing to do is just, do your due diligence and research. And nobody else can do this for you. Nobody else can say, hey, you should go do that. You need that, right? You have to do it for yourself. You have to want to create a change in yourself. And so I think I would just say, look within yourself before you've done the mushrooms and say, am I going to do something with this? Can I do something with this? Do I want to change? Do I want to be different? And follow your gut, and then just do your due diligence and find yourself a facilitator that you connect with.
Great. Teresa, how about you?
It's not very original, but to follow up with Scott, I think, as a therapist, sometimes when people come in for initial consults, I always ask them, have you talked to some other people? Because I think it's actually important to have conversations. We're so different. We come from different backgrounds, different educations, different theoretical orientations. And I think it's important to have some comparison that you can check in your gut of who do I feel comfortable with, because like I said earlier, you can't hide anything on mushrooms. And so it's just to find the person that you want to work with, take the time, talk to different people, do your research, and then trust yourself.
Wonderful. And Niko, do you have some final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah. Well, I guess the thing I would encourage you to do is, if you're thinking about doing this, and especially thinking about doing it without a facilitator, I would certainly talk to a few facilitators first. I'm personally someone who doesn't do psilocybin on my own anymore because I find it really scary. And I need someone there to guide me through that fear. I have felt the grief of all of humanity in some of those journeys. And if I didn't have someone there, I don't know what I would have done. And I've done it alone and felt that in the past too. And so I think having someone is so important. And so just consider that. And it's why I've devoted my career to helping out this space and helping out the facilitators who are holding that space for folks, because I feel like it's so important. So that's what I'll leave you with.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so the final thing that we wanted to share with you is a continuation of the conversation around the Forward Fund. We have something fun that we put together. I'm gonna see if I can share my screen. Let's see. Wow. So the Forward Fund, as Niko explained, is a way that we are helping with financial assistance for people who otherwise would not be able to access psychedelic therapy. And instead of just asking you to make a donation, which of course you're welcome to do and encouraged to do, we put together a limited edition t-shirt, which is right here. It comes in 2 different colors. And we think it's a fun way to show your support, spark some conversation. And 100% of the proceeds from this t-shirt are going to be devoted to the Forward Fund. So let me drop the link in here. I'm managing a couple things at once.
I wanted to.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that this isn't AI generated art. We worked with an actual illustrator, so supporting them as well. And Henry's done some amazing t-shirts with Tricycle Day, and so we were just so fortunate that he was up for doing one to support the Forward Fund, because as he mentioned, the funds from this go to actually pay facilitators. There's no transaction fees that we take out of it or anything like that. So the proceeds, obviously we pay for the shirt with part of this as well, but the rest of it goes into helping to reduce the cost of psychedelic care for people who may not be able to afford it. Oh, now you're muted, Henry.
Yeah, I'm trying to manage some background noise.
Oh,
You're good.
gotcha. Yeah. Great. Well, that is what we wanted to cover today. This session has been recorded. It's going to be available at this exact same link. So if you wanted to share it with others, you're able to send them this link and they can access it the same way you have. We will be sending out a follow-up email with some of the resources that we mentioned, with, of course, the way to access the t-shirt if you want to think on it, if you want to sleep on it. It's a big decision. It is and Henry, it's a limited edition, right? Like it's not going to be around forever.
Yes. Yeah. Apologies for the chaos in the background. I have a son who's turning 3 in 2 weeks. The t-shirt is available starting now and through next Wednesday. So it's a limited edition drop. It's a collector's item. You should get, every size, every color for everybody, and rock them proudly. And we would love to see it out in the wild.
Amazing. Well, Henry, thanks for your leadership in this and guiding us through this. I know that your fans love to see your face, and so thanks for coming out from behind the keyboard and chatting with us. And Teresa, Scott, thank you so much as well for not only showing up and sharing your experiences, but the work that you do every day. Beyond just holding space with your clients, I know that running the business of these centers is not easy, and it's often thankless and in the background, but I appreciate it, and it's super important what you're doing. So thank you.
Thanks for having us. And Niko, thank you for all that you do. I mean, you are probably one of the most responsive people that I've ever met in terms of like anytime we run into a problem, and we just really, really appreciate having Althea behind us.
Scott just concurred, I'm sure, but you're muted as well.
I did. I'm inept, but I do concur. Yes, that Althea has been awesome to work with. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
We're
ending right on time. Oh yeah.
And most importantly, perhaps, well, it shouldn't be ranked, but also thank you to everybody who showed up, because your attention and respect for this subject matter is really appreciated. And we hope that you'll share the information that you learned today with other people who could benefit from it. So thanks a lot for tuning in, and hope to see you at the next one.
Perfect. Thank you.
Bye.